Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 828. Had the white pieces and started off with knight f3. My opponent went d5, the second choice after knight f6, which is what I usually play with black, kind of a waiting move. But d5, just taking a space in the center, can't be a bad move. Let's see, and I go c4 here, which is the Reti gambit. So you can take that pawn, and then white usually rounds it up. So the way I play it, it is not really a gambit because I get the pawn back, but it leads to some interesting positions. Declining the gambit is usually done with e6 or c6. Those are respectable moves here. The move he played, just defending the pawn, it's another way of declining the gambit, but really I should have played with this c takes d5 move, because what happens is this transposes. So after c takes d5, he takes back with either the knight or the queen, and I can play d4 here. This has transposed into the martial defense to the queen's gambit, which is not a very good defense. In fact, this gives white a pretty big edge, because this e4 move is always coming with tempo to kick that knight back, and the knight doesn't have a target on c3 like it does on the Grinfeld. So this is a good position for white. So that's the way to play it for the maximum advantage. But I played g3 here. I was just keeping in Reti lines. Goes e6, go bishop g4, and then he goes d takes c4. This position could also have come from an English opening too. But anyway, I call it the Reti gambit because that's how I started out. And now I go ahead and give the check here. And then normally the check is blocked with knight bd7. He played knight c6, which maybe in some lines there's some pressure against that knight because it's pinned and the bishop is on it. But while looking at it with the chess engine, it didn't seem like there was an immediate way for me to take advantage of it. So taking the pawn back seems fine in this position. So even though knight c6 was a rare move, it's not necessarily a bad move, and we get a playable position for both sides. I think bishop b4 maybe is a little more questionable. I kind of get to gain a tempo on that bishop later. Anyway, I go ahead and castle here. I could have played knight c3. I sort of was reluctant to play that because it blocks the queen's retreat back to c2. Sometimes that's useful to have that move available. But well, looking at it with the chess engine, knight c3 is the top choice and seems like a fine move. But castles is also a good move here. He castles, and I go with d4. So expanding in the center. Goes rook e8 here, and I go bishop g5. Goes h6, kicking the bishop. I decide to go ahead and trade it off and just play this position. I've given black the bishop pair, but this bishop is still locked in behind the pawn chain, and I get this e4 move in, so I get a lot of center influence. So I think this is fine for white as well. And now right after I played e4, yeah, right here I played e4, and he immediately played bishop to a5, which shows he was being alert, because there was actually a threat. I was threatening to just push this pawn forward. He takes, I take, and then the knight moves, and I can grab the bishop there. So he moved the bishop right away, and so I never had a chance to play that tactic. But that's an example of how I kind of gain a tempo on that bishop and also get a big center out of it. So this is all okay, but still playable for black. Let's see. The chess engine is giving moves like rook to d8 here, or bishop to b6. I think this move here is the first of some slight mistakes that are causing black's position to go downhill. It's kind of tempting to undermine the center like this, but well, I'm just going to push this pawn forward, and the knight really doesn't have any great squares to go to. If it comes to b4, I'm just going to kick it again. It may end up getting into trouble there if it goes to from b4 to c2. I can harass it with the rook. So and the other move would be to come back here, and it's just kind of shut in by those pawns. So he went ahead and plunged in with knight to d4, which was actually the top choice of the engine. So, but this basically loses a pawn. I can take that, and then I can put pressure on the pawn with knight to b5. There's an interesting tactic here, though, that I missed. And while it doesn't win a piece, it's kind of a funny one. You don't usually think of. This move, queen b5, is a double attack because the rook on the back rank is completely undefended. This bishop is not developed, so it's a fork. Now my knight is hanging too, so that's why I don't really gain material. He plays c6 to kick my queen, protect his knight. I mean his rook there. So I take the bishop, he takes the knight, and I come out a pawn ahead in this line as well. And I have a center pawn, so that would be best play, and that's the way to get a clear pawn up in this position. Knight b5, I also end up with the pawn up, but he has some compensation for it. Let's see, instead of queen b6, the chess engine is recommending bishop to d7 here, just developing, and I get the pawn, but he gets some active bishops there. Anyway, he went with the queen b6, so went ahead and grabbed that. Yeah, queen b6. I was wondering about queen b6. That in combination with e5, it does kind of put him in a bind. I thought at first I was winning a piece here with b4, but I'm not, because he has this very good move a6. I looked at it with the chess engine. This is the top choice. The problem is that I mean, his bishop is trapped, so I could just move my knight away. But whenever I move my knight away, then the queen can take the pawn. The bishop and queen are both coordinating on the pawn with my knight not in the way. So it's a nice move, a nice resource that black has here. So I don't actually win material here. Well, I don't win a piece. I think I still end up a pawn up. Yeah, in fact, he took with the queen and then I took here. And I'm going to end up a couple pawns up, so I've got a pretty big advantage after that. His best try here was to actually take. And now his pawn is attacking my queen, my pawn is attacking his queen. And so we end up in this position with queens off. Let's see, I can throw on rook to c1, and then I could take on c7. So I have an extra pawn, but we both have advanced passed pawns, and these look pretty dangerous too. So this position is not clear to me, although the chess engine rates it as good for white. It would be hard to play, and black would have some chances, so it's worth thinking about. Anyway, he took the knight with his queen, keeping the queens on. I took on c7, and then so I have a pretty good position here, but bishop d7 is actually a mistake. So if you want to spot the tactic here, what can white play? What's the best move for white? Okay, if you want time to think about it, pause the video here. I'm going to give the answer away. The best move here is a4, kicking the queen. The queen has no square to go to that defends the bishop. So this just wins a piece. And so that's a tactic I overlooked here. Let's see, I played queen b6 instead. This leaves me 2 pawns up, and well, because I'm going to round up this pawn, then I'll be 2 pawns up. I'm only 1 pawn up at the moment. And it also undoubled my a pawn, so now I have solid pawns over here on the queen side. And so basically I'm just a pawn up with no counterplay, and that's a very dangerous passed pawn there. So I'm just winning here. And so I stay winning for a while. Let's just go forward through these moves. He keeps some life in the position by holding on to this pawn, but eventually I can kind of gang up on it and capture it. It's just too hard for him to defend that pawn when it's behind enemy lines and my pawns are shielding it from his rooks. So it was sort of inevitable that I was going to recapture that pawn. So we get this rook and pawn endgame where I'm 2 pawns up. And so it should be a win. But, well, rook and pawn endgames can be tricky, and I make some mistakes. Right here, let's see, I played king f2. It's a natural move, wanting to get my king into the game. But if I just played a5, that would save me some trouble. Now, king f2 is not an actual mistake, because this is still winning. But it allows black to play a5, and now he's got some targets here. So, it's the kind of thing that is giving black a little bit of hope. And then here he went, I went rook a3. I guess this is still okay, but it would have been better to just take this guy. I was a little worried that after the exchange, his rook would be on this pawn. I was failing to notice that actually I can just push the a pawn forward here to defend my pawn. And even though he can push this guy forward and knock my rook off of the A file, the B pawn is still defended and his rook can't get around to attack my pawn. So I have time to round up his pawn and get back to defending the A pawn. So that would be another kind of simple win. Instead, I played rook A, A3, and so he gets a pawn back here. I take, he takes back with the rook, and then I bring my king in. Goes king E7. Let's see, I go F4. Actually, king F4 is preferred by the chess engine. I was kind of thinking about that a little bit. You need to help these pawns come forward, and king F4 is a way of getting past this this rook that's drawn a line across the fourth rank there. But if you can sneak past it and help these pawns promote, that's going to be good for white. I just wasn't sure it was working, but the chess engine likes that king F4 move. Anyway, I went pawn to F4, trying to mobilize the pawns this way. He goes king D6, and now let's see, I went king D3. So the next couple moves are what give away my advantage. So right here, instead of king D3, let's just bring my king over here. Chess engine is recommending rook D3 and giving up this pawn. Yeah, I actually thought about this because it defends this pawn and I can push these guys forward, but I wasn't sure how quickly these pawns would get mobilized and if white or if black would be able to stop my center pawns. But there's a trick here I didn't see, which is that I could push this e pawn forward, and he takes, I take back, and if he takes with the king, I can just push this pawn forward and he can't stop it. And of course, if he doesn't take with the king here, he just goes back, then I can start marching those pawns forward, and the answer about whose pawns will be quicker will be answered in my favor. So so that's the way, another way I can win that. Let's see, he went G5 here. I think actually after this move it was even, but he had to play G6. So G5, I had one more chance. Chess engine says I could play king E3 with the same idea, bringing the rook here to D3 and pushing these pawns forward. But I didn't. I played H3, and after this, it's just even up until he blunders. So yeah, it's just well, this was a very good move. This move that he played, F5, undermining my pawns. I don't, it's threatening to take here, and when I push my pawn forward, then his king can grab my d pawn. So anyway, yeah, it's just completely even. Now the material is even. And if he had just shuffled his rook back and forth on this on the fourth rank there, I would have settled for the draw because I have no ideas here. My king is just going back and forth. And even this trade, I wasn't sure if I might have winning chances because I do have the protected passed pawn, but he has a passer over here. So this is still even, but he needs to play king d5. That's a key point in endgames, and now when you're down to rook and pawns, your king has to stay as active as possible. And so this is as far forward as it can come. If it comes forward any further, I can march that pawn forward. Of course, I'm blocking his path as well. So, but I can't make any progress either, so this is still a draw at this point. But he, for some reason, went king e7. Maybe he was just low on time and kind of losing his nerve a little bit. And after king e7, this is just a losing king and pawn endgame. It's a great illustration about how king position really makes all the difference in these king and pawn endgames. So he just lost tempo, and I got to bring my king forward, and now I win these pawns on the queen side. Or if he tries to go around this way, then I can queen in the center there. And after a couple moves, here I take this pawn, and he resigned. If he pushes, I have a simple way of winning by just taking that pawn off and then getting a queen with one of these two pawns. So he resigned at this point. Anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon.